What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video and welcome back to another rebuild review. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get this out on the normal Sunday. I've been dealing with a cold this weekend, as you can kind of still tell with my nose and my upper lip. But today we are going to be doing the much anticipated Montreal Canadiens. Because yeah, for Montreal, after shocking the hockey world by making the Stanley Cup final in 2021, after sneaking into the playoffs in the Canadian division with just 59 points in 56 games, overcoming a 3-1 lead versus their rival Toronto Maple Leafs, beating the Vegas Golden Knights to make the Stanley Cup final. They had found themselves with just 23 points in 45 games and had fired Bergevin back in November and then fired Dom Ducharme, the head coach. After over a decade of Carey Price basically carrying the franchise, they had now had to move on from Carey Price, as well as having a new general manager in Kent Hughes and a new head coach in Marty St. Louis to usher in this Montreal Canadiens rebuild. Yeah, that's the time frame that we're going to look at. I know you technically could say that their rebuild started maybe back in like 2018 once they started to kind of decline, but we're going to go from this new Kent Hughes era. Yes, they did have Caulfield and Suzuki from the prior regime, but February 2022 and on is what we're going to be looking at. If you're new around here, how we grade these rebuilds is we do 4 different sectors, that being drafting and developing, trades, signings and extensions, and the actual on-ice results. We grade every single sector. Then we come together and have our final grade and our closing thoughts. But yeah, here we are up first with the drafting, developing. Again, we don't just look at the draft picks from this era. We also look at who they inherited, who they developed from the 2021 draft. We'll talk about Logan Mailloux later, but Joshua Waugh looks like he could potentially be a bottom 6 forward going forward for this team. That's been a solid developmental story for the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, in the 2020 draft, Caden Gooley went 16th overall. He's kind of already established himself as a very steadfast, more so defensive, second pairing defenseman. That's a drafting and developing W for sure. Nothing else to really came. Actually, Jacob Dobish, Sean Farrell, very good second season in the AHL. Probably not going to be much, but maybe a third line scorer. Dobish looks like he can be a good backup going forward, kind of for this team, behind Montembeault, behind eventually a Jacob Fowler. Good development there. He really broke out this season. Cole Caulfield, huge developmental win. He was a steal in the moment. The fact he fell to 15th overall, but yeah, made the jump and was pretty impactful on their Stanley Cup final run right off rip. Had a good first 2 seasons, then really took solid playmaking steps to get to 65 points. In this year, the goal scoring came in spades with 37 goals, 70 points, one of the best goal scorers in the NHL, point blank, period. Jaden Struble played a solid role this year on the team, 56 games in back-to-back seasons as a second-round pick. Good development there. Raphael Harvey-Pinard, if you watched yesterday's video, I had him pretty high as a prospect back in 2023. Still, as a 7th-round pick, that's a big win for the Montreal Canadiens, even if at this point he's probably not going to be much. 2018, Kotkaniemi, I don't blame the current management. Or he was already out of there by the time the current management got there. Romanov, we'll talk about that more so with the trades and develop. He was barely there under the current management. Jordan Harris eventually wasn't a trade that we'll talk about, but yeah, it turned into somewhat of an everyday NHL defenseman as a 3rd-round pick. Good job there. And of course, Nick Suzuki is not listed in terms of the draft picks because he was drafted by the Vegas Golden Knights, but he turned into an absolute stud. That's a huge developmental win. Now we're going to dive into their actual picks. Up first, Slavkovsky would not go number 1 in a rebuild, would go probably most likely 3rd, but it was a pretty weak draft, and they got potentially a special power forward. Still got to put it together, more so his overall game, but already is a physical specimen out there. Meshar, kind of a miss at this point. Maybe could be something, but the OHL numbers have not been too encouraging, just barely above a point per game, and this year below half a point per game at the AHL. That usually doesn't turn into an NHLer. Owen Beck looks like he can be a solid bottom 6 guy, maybe a potential 3rd-line center for the Montreal Canadiens going forward. Solid AHL numbers this year. Lane Hudson, though, might end up being the best value pick of the entire 2020s. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that. At 62nd overall, he killed it. He only went 62nd because he was undersized. But Kent Hughes saw through that, immediately had like arguably the best freshman defenseman season like of the 21st century, then followed it up with another great season, and then had 66 points in 82 games. He is an absolute stud. Other guys in this draft, I think Adam Engstrom was maybe solid AHL numbers for a defenseman in his draft year, +3. This guy, okay in the OHL this season. Moving on to 2023, Reinbacher is the one top 10 pick that you maybe would want back. The injuries have been so prevalent. As you can see, he only played 23 games total this season. Maybe he can turn into something. Probably should have taken a Michkov or like a Ryan Leonard. I understand at the time the need was desperately for right-handed defensemen. And I think Reinbacher's still going to be a good second pair guy, but not loving that at this point. But they really made it up for it with their second pick being Jacob Fowler, who this year had a 940 at the college level. In his first year at the college level, 926, but that was a super team. There was questions, is he just kind of like on a super team? They were still very good this year, but he even took a further step and was very good in the AHL this year as well. A top 3 goalie prospect without a doubt in the NHL. Florian Jekai, also in terms of development, Arbor Jekai has turned into an NHLer. Florian Jekai, brother of Arbor Jekai, was looked at as kind of like a Nepo pick, but he was highly productive this year at the AHL, especially goal scoring wise. That's been very solid development. Outside of Luke Middlestat, brother of Casey Middlestat, I believe. Sadly, not really turning into much. Going on to the 2024 draft, steal. Everybody knew that this was a steal. For some reason, he fell, much like a Matvei Michkov the year prior, and he tore up the KHL with 49 points in 65 games and looked like he belonged at the NHL level. Is like plus 250 to win the Calder this year. The next closest guy is like plus 900. Heavy Calder favorite. And looks like he might end up being the best forward on the Montreal Canadiens in 5 to 6 years. And that's with Nick Suzuki being a top 30 player in the NHL right now. They traded up to get Michael Hage. We'll talk about that trade, all the pieces that they gave up. But he's progressing pretty well in terms of a need of a second line center. He potentially could be the answer considering on like a bad Michigan team. You look at Michigan, like compared to prior seasons, this was one of the worst Michigan teams of recent memory, and he still was point per game. They reloaded a decent amount, and I think next year he might have a shot at a Hobie Baker. Atos Koivu, he not the best Liga season, but he was very good at the World Junior Showcase. He was great for Finland, so maybe he could potentially turn into something. Of course, his father was the longtime captain, or yeah, he's Saku's kid, not Mikko. Jesus. Moving on to 2025, they traded up for Zarovsky. Interesting guy, 6'1", 50 points in 45 games at the Russian junior level. LJ Mooney is also a guy that Canadiens fans are rightfully so very high on, considering much like a Cole Caulfield kind of fell just because of his size. Not saying he's a Cole Caulfield level prospect, but was highly productive. And if he hits, he could really, really hit in terms of the Montreal Canadiens. And yeah, that's mostly it in terms of the draft picks. Yeah, in terms of the drafting and developing grade, I think I'm going to go with an A. We're starting off very strong. The Hudson pick is what really stands out and kind of makes up for the potentially Reinbacher pick not exactly being a huge hit. Slavkovsky, again, for first overall, you maybe don't love it, but when you look at the context of that draft class, you're perfectly fine with it. Philip Meshar is a miss, but that's like a late first round pick. There's like a 50-50 chance that those guys are even going to be NHLers. Getting Jacob Fowler in the third round is also awesome. Fowler and Hudson just complete steals, it's looking like. And in terms of the actual development, Suzuki, Caulfield, and Gooley are the three guys that they inherited, that Kent Hughes and St. Louis inherited, and they were already like pretty established guys, at least Caulfield and Suzuki, but they have only continued to grow and become better and become foundational pieces. At this point, there are two guys in terms of development that haven't quite worked out, in Kirby Dach, that's more so to do with injuries, and Alex Newhook. But overall, they have done a great job finding young talent. Ivan Demidov, I didn't even mention him, at 5th overall to, in my opinion, probably get the no doubt second best player from that class. A very good class, it's looking like, was awesome. They've done a very good job finding young talent, drafting young talent, and then developing that. I think that they get an A. Now we're going to be moving on to the trades, and Kent Hughes made a lot of trades throughout his tenure. We are starting off in February of 2022 when the Canadiens weren't dead last in the NHL and had to ship out some older guys, Tyler Toffoli and his 2.5 years left at $4.25 million for Emil Heineman, Tyler Pitlick, a 2022 first-round pick, and a 2023 5th-round pick. When looking at Toffoli, he was amazing on this contract. The following year, he would tear it up with 34 goals, 39 assists, and 73 points. So it was a pretty good deal for the Flames, but for the Canadiens, they had absolutely no use for a guy that was only going to hurt them in terms of the tank. And yeah, that first, unfortunately, became Philip Meshar. So they got solid value for them. Heineman was a decently regarded prospect and still 20 years old, and they eventually flipped him in the Noah Dobson deal, although he was like the 3rd most valuable package, part of that package that went to the New York Islanders. So the value in this deal was solid, but unfortunately, the pick just did not quite pan out. Calgary was an absolute wagon that season, and as a result, it was 26th overall. So yeah, it helped them in terms of reaching their ultimate goal and tanking for a couple of years, but in terms of value, it wasn't that good. Next up, another 2022 deadline move that was insane then that they got a 1st-round pick, and even more insane now was, of course, the Ben Chiarot deal to the Florida Panthers. He was an expiring UFA, and they got a 1st, a 4th, and a prospect. Ben Chiarot had been playing big minutes on the Montreal Canadiens and was on that Stanley Cup final team playing serious minutes. But he just wasn't that good in those minutes. He was kind of like Rasmus Ristolainen in Buffalo. Just because you play big minutes doesn't automatically mean you're a good player. And in Florida, during the playoffs, he would only play 17 minutes, relegated to the 3rd pair, and they gave up a 1st-round pick. That 1st-round pick was later used in the Alex Newhook deal. So yeah, this guy should have probably got like a 3rd-round pick, but because of the hype, because he was physical, because he played big minutes, Kent Hughes was able to get a 1st-round pick, and God bless him. Continued to sell at the 2022 deadline. This one was not quite as good, though, considering he gave up Artturi Lehkonen for Justin Barron in a 2nd-round pick. Artturi Lehkonen was not what he is now back then, although, yeah, he was an effective middle sixer. He has turned into on to win the Stanley Cup in that 2022 season. Barron was a formerly highly touted prospect that was a 1st-round pick in 2020. Did not quite work out. He was later traded, and we'll talk about that. And that 2nd-round pick was also later traded and turned into Carter George. So this was not quite an ideal move for Kent Hughes. At the time, he wasn't going to get a 1st-round pick for Artturi Lehkonen, but these assets and the evaluation on Justin Barron was a little bit off. Don't worry, we're finishing off the 2022 deadline with a big-time win for the Montreal Canadiens in the Brett Kulak deal. He was traded for William Lagesson, a 2022 2nd-round pick, a late 2nd-round pick, and a 2024 7th-round pick. And granted, for Edmonton, Kulak has been awesome for them, kind of in a solid 3rd-pair role, defensive defenseman. He's been exactly what they wanted when they traded for him. The only problem is that 2nd-round pick became 62nd overall in the 2022 draft, and the player that they selected was, of course, Lane Hutson. So they technically turned Brett Kulak into Lane Hutson. An awesome move by Kent Hughes. Fast forward to the 2022 draft, and there was a big trade on draft night. I was at the Bell Center when this happened. Of course, the Montreal Canadiens traded Alex Romanov in the 93rd overall pick to the New York Islanders for 13th. Then they traded 13th and 66th to the Chicago Blackhawks for Kirby Dach. Yeah, after selecting Slavkovsky 1st overall, kind of controversially, ahead of a Logan Cooley, ahead of a Shane Wright, 2nd-line center was a huge need for this team and still is. So as a result, they decided to trade for Kirby Dach, who, although he had not quite proven it at the NHL level, was a former 3rd overall pick just 3 years ago, 6'4", possessed a lot of skill, had dealt with some injuries, but there was definitely potential for him to be their 2nd-line center of the future. And in that first season with the Montreal Canadiens, you thought that you were getting your 2nd-line center of the future. He had 38 points in 58 games. Of course, he missed 24 games, but on the ice, he was a pretty damn good player. The only problem is 2 games into the following season, he would tear his ACL and MCL, missed the entire season. And then this year came back and only had 22 points in 57 games, got his season cut short with another knee surgery. And now apparently he might not even be ready for training camp. Of course, it also does look a little bit tough when that 13th overall pick became Frank Nazar, a center who also actually dealt with injuries in his first season after the draft. But this season tore up the AHL with 24 points in 21 games. Was around half a point per game in the NHL, signed a 7-year deal at $6.6 million at World Championships, led Team USA in points with 6 goals and 6 assists en route to gold, and looks like the 2nd-line center of the future for the Chicago Blackhawks. I understand Nazar, another undersized forward, wouldn't have been ideal for the Montreal Canadiens, but it's definitely looking like the Chicago Blackhawks benefited a lot from this trade. The 66th overall pick became Gavin Hayes, who struggled a decent amount at the AHL level, producing offense with only 15 points in 50 games, but Nazar has been awesome. That's my New York Islanders, who were more so of a win-now team at the time. Alex Romanov has been solid, playing around 21 minutes a night. Not going to act like he's the best thing since sliced bread, but he has definitely been a rock-solid, available defenseman compared to Kirby Dach, who has dealt with his injuries and just recently signed an 8-year deal, which I don't exactly love, but still, he has been consistent throughout his time. And at 98th overall, they actually got Isaiah George, who, because of the Islanders' injuries this season, had to play 33 games at the NHL level. It was actually pretty solid. He survived at least, and at the AHL level had 14 points in 33 games, so he's looking like he can be an okay third pair guy in the future. So yeah, Kent Hughes made an aggressive move to acquire a player that was the same age as Cole Caulfield and a little bit younger than a guy like Nick Suzuki. It was a risk on draft night. It wasn't some sure thing because Kirby Dach was not a proven good NHL player at the time and had some injury history. It unfortunately had not worked out. It's not going to be the make or break it in their rebuild. But yeah, he shot his shot. You got to shoot your shot at times in a rebuild. Unfortunately, this did not work out. Part of it was out of their control with injuries. But at the end of the day, it is kind of an L in Kent Hughes' books. Get back to some W's as they traded with the Pittsburgh Penguins, acquiring Mike Matheson and a 2023 4th-round pick for Jeff Petrie and Ryan Poehling. Habs wisely decided to get younger at the time because while Petrie was great for them in the late 2010s and early 2020s, including finishing 13th for the Norris in 2021 with around 60-ish point pace, he had shown some regression in the 2022 season. Matheson was a 27-year-old at the time that had shown some promise, but behind a guy like Chris Letang was never going to get that top opportunity, top power play to really show what he had. Yeah, while Petrie would continue to regress in Pittsburgh, Matheson would have 34 points in 48 games his first season, then 62 points. He did kind of fall off this year once he went off the top power play, but still, considering they paid so little to get him, they paid him so little in contract, this was a damn good trade and helped develop some of the young forwards in terms of giving them a solid puck-moving defenseman and a top guy in the power play. Continuing on with the good trades, they acquired Sean Monahan, and to do so, they got a 2025 first-round pick. Of course, at the time, Calgary was in a really weird spot as Gaudreau had left, Kachuk had demanded a trade, and they got Jonathan Huberdeau and Uyghur. They needed to free some money to sign Nazem Kadri and continue their winning ways. That, of course, did not happen, and Sean Monahan was making $6.375 million. And due to injuries, in fairness, at the time, he was not remotely worth that. So as a result, Montreal, with the crap ton of salary cap space with Carey Price on LTIR, they weaponized their salary cap. They acquired him. He did get hurt the following season, but he was highly productive, 17 points in 25 games. They eventually re-signed him for 1 year at $1.985 million. And then we got to talk about this trade as well, as although it's not exactly in chronological order, then they traded him for a first-round pick. So basically, they got 2 first-round picks just to take on Sean Monahan. It is an absolute masterclass in terms of rebuilding. Those picks were 16th and 26th overall. That first-round pick that eventually became the Calgary 2025 pick was 16th overall and eventually traded to go get Noah Dobson. So in looking at, I don't know why I just did such like an accent there, but it was awesome. The Monahan experience in Montreal, and he also helped develop the young guys in that 2023-2024 season. This was great by Kent Hughes. Next up, it becomes a yearly tradition that Kent Hughes goes after a formerly highly drafted 2019 prospect as he trades for Alex Newhook, giving up that first-round pick from the Ben Sherratt deal as well as his own second-round pick, the 31st and 37th overall pick, and a prospect to go get Alex Newhook, who, of course, was a lottery pick in 2019, but was kind of stuck in like a bottom 6 role for the Colorado Avalanche because Colorado Avalanche were such a good goddamn team, and you thought maybe he's still 22 years old in a bigger role. He could be much better. And in fairness, much like Kirby Dach that first season, although injury-riddled, had 34 points in 55 games. This year, though, 15 goals, 11 assists, 26 points in 82 games. A very fun player to watch. He zips around. He's very fast, but in terms of actually putting it together, in terms of finishing and making high-level plays, it just has not really come to fruition. Yes, those picks did not really materialize into much. 31st overall being Mikhail Guliev, who's been okay in Russia, but has not taken big steps in terms of his point production. And Ethan Gauthier has not been anything special in the QMJHL. But much like Kirby Dach, these assets could have been used much more effectively in terms of getting a far better player instead of Alex Newhook, who might eventually get phased out of this forward core just because they have better young talent up and coming. So to finish out the 2023 summer, he's kind of a liaison to their Carlson deal, weaponizing his open cap space to take on Jeff Petrie, Casey DeSmith, and another player. And as a result, they get a second-round pick to do so. That second-round pick was later traded up in the 2025 NHL draft to go get Alex Orlovsky. So yeah, he would also go on to trade Jeff Petrie and Casey DeSmith for mid-round picks. So just weaponize your cap space, take on bad contracts, get assets to do so. That's rebuilding 101, baby. Fast forward basically a year, considering we already talked about the Monahan 2024 trade deadline trade, to the 2024 draft, where they trade up to 21st overall, giving up a first that's 26th overall, 57th, and 198th. They go up and get Michael Hage, who was a highly regarded prospect that was expected to go maybe even a little bit higher than that. We talked about it. We saw his stats. Point per game at Michigan this year should be even better this season as he takes a step. Maybe potentially the answer at second line center. LA is also very happy with this deal, though, considering they got Liam Greentree at 26th overall, who went from 90 points in his draft year, which was a monster season, to 119, already 6'3", 210 pounds. Needs to work on his skating, but he could potentially be something in terms of a power forward playmaker. And they also got Carter George, 57th overall, who's viewed as a top 7 to 13 overall prospect. So a win-win deal for both parties. Montreal didn't need another winger, didn't need a goalie prospect. They needed that center. LA picks up two pretty damn good prospects in this move. Both parties are very happy. Shortly after, they trade away Jonathan Kovacevic to the New Jersey Devils for a 4th-round pick. This one doesn't look too hot. Kovacevic at the time was 26 years old, a much coveted right-handed defenseman. He was awesome defensively this season for the New Jersey Devils, and as a result, got himself a nice 5-year, $4 million per contract. Not going to make or break the rebuild, but you would have liked to maybe keep Kovacevic and then trade him midway through next year or something like that. Middle of that offseason, they also traded for Patrick Laine. Remember when teams actually made trades and fun moves in August? I wish I lived in that world where that happened still, but they got Patrick Laine in a 2026 second-round pick to take on his last 2 years at $8.7 million. Only had to give up youngster Jordan Harris. Yeah, dude, this was a good deal by them, considering the fact that they got a player that could play top 6 minutes, and they got a second-round pick to do so. Has Laine been worth $8.7 million? No, he wasn't close to it this season. At this point, he is kind of a power play specialist that is kind of a black hole at 5-on-5, but it's not like last season or even this season they're going to be that close to the salary cap and pushing to win a Stanley Cup completely. So I like this deal for them acquiring him. If they sign him to some kind of 4-year deal at $5.5 to $6.5 million, salary cap goes down. After this, I think it's a really good move to get him within your system. They got a second-round pick. I like this deal still. Solid asset management, but it's not as great as some people thought it was going to be in the moment and still defend it to this day. At the end of the day, he's not worth $8.7 million, and he does have big deficiencies as a player in health risks. Middle of the 2024-2025 season, they acquired Carrier only for Justin Barron. Carrier played 20 minutes and 50 seconds a night for the Montreal Canadiens this season, and he was very solid. He was a solid second-pair guy. Barron also did kind of find his game on the Nashville Predators, but for a team that needed somebody more so of a veteran like Carrier, good deal. Fast forward to about 2 months ago, and we have arguably the biggest deal of the Kent Hughes era, that, of course, being the Noah Dobson deal. Gave up Emil Heineman in the 16th and 17th overall selections. It was a decent amount to give up, and they signed him to a pretty big contract, but it is very rare that a 25-year-old right-handed defenseman that has a 70-point season on his resume becomes available. So I perfectly understand Montreal giving up this much, giving him that contract, considering the fact that they were already set in terms of their prospect pool. They didn't need the 16th and 17th overall pick. And even who the New York Islanders selected in Eklund, they didn't really need another smaller forward. In Aitchison, they were set on the left side with Gouli and Hudson. So I'm okay with what they gave up. Dobson looks like he could potentially be the missing piece to this defense core because there's a lot of question marks with a David Reinbacher. So they get a 6'4" defenseman that can be a very frustrating player at times. I'm a New York Islanders fan. I watched them for 4 years, but the highs are very, very high, and he's not going to be relied on to play 25, 26 minutes a night on the Montreal Canadiens. He can settle into a nice second pair role, probably. He's going to be playing the second most on the team, but second pair right side and second power play alongside like a Caden Gouli, and I think he can thrive in that role. So this was a win-win for both parties. And lastly, this was just a big win for the Montreal Canadiens straight up compared to the St. Louis Blues. They got Zach Bolduc for Logan Mailloux. Mailloux had no spot on this team after they acquired Noah Dobson on the right side. You had Dobson, you had Ryan Bacher on the top two power plays. You got Hudson, you got Dobson. You don't play Mailloux on a third pair role with no power play. So he was extremely expendable, and even his AHL numbers went down this year compared to the prior year. And they pick up Bull Duke, who is a physical wrecking ball at 108 hits this year, as well as scoring 19 goals, 17 assists, 36 points in 72 games. Just a very solid two-way middle six forward. Not some kind of superstar, but going to be a very important piece. They'll probably sign him to some kind of like 5x5 after this season. It's going to be a net surplus value deal. So very good move by Kent Hughes. Overall for trades, I think I land on a B+. It is kind of a mixed bag. The Doc and Newhook deals, not some kind of disaster, but definitely just gave up a little bit too much for unproven players that are not exactly panned out. But besides that, they got pretty good value for their older guys when they decided to sell in 2022 and 2023. They weaponized their salary cap space smartly in moves like Erik Karlsson, like Sean Monahan, and then they used some of those assets to trade up to get a Michael Hage, to get a Noah Dobson, to get a Zachary Bull Duke Dobson. They did give up a decent amount, but I still think it's good, maybe even very good. It's not great because of the Newhook, because of the Doc, because of even the Lehkonen. I think a B+ is where I land for the Montreal Canadiens in trades. Okay, so the drafting / developing and the trades are in the books. Now we are doing the signings, and I have to mention this because if I just go through this, people are going to think I made a mistake. Suzuki signed his deal October 12th, 2021, when Mark Bergevin was still a general manager. That deal is awesome. It doesn't count for this rebuild review. Again, we're going from February 2022 and on. And starting off, we got the Kirby Doc extension, 4 years, $3.3625 million. And yeah, this deal was awesome for the first year when he had 38 points in 58 games. But because of the injuries, it's not looking too hot. It's only $3.3 million, so it's not the end of the world. Just unfortunately did not work out. Jake Allen, who was kind of like the 1B at the time, signed a 2-year deal at $3.85 million. He got kind of 1B money, and he kind of stunk on this deal, had an 891 in the first full season, then an 892, and got traded for a third-round pick at the 2024 deadline. So they were able to still move off him, but not quite a good deal. Good deal alert, even great deal alert, as the following one was Cole Caulfield's 8-year, $7.85 million deal. When looking at it, he was coming off a season where he had 26 goals in 46 games, but only 10 assists. So people were questioning his playmaking ability. The following season goes for 65 points first year of that deal. Then this year, 37 goals, 70 points. Already is like a mid $8 million player, and you're going to hear this throughout this video as the salary cap continues to go up, and he's only 24 years old. This only takes him till he's like 29, 30 years old. This is going to be $1 to $3 million of surplus value basically every single year, barring injuries or some kind of crazy fall off. Talked about it before, but Kent Hughes being able to re-sign Sean Monahan 1 year, $1.985 million kind of on a prove-it deal was awesome, and he had 13 goals, 35 points in 49 games. And then, of course, they flipped him for a first. Part of the reason why he got that first-round pick is because the salary cap was so goddamn low. They acquired Alex Newhook. They signed him to a 4-year deal at $2.9 million. The first year was, again, worth it, probably like a Kirby Doc with his 34 points in 55 games. Last year was not quite worth it. I think he's going to bounce back and be around a 30-ish point guy, and it's only $2.9 million, so still probably a positive value deal. Middle of the 2023-2024 season, Sam Montembeault signed an extension, 3 years, $3.15 million. This was awesome. His first season had a .901 save percentage, which doesn't sound like much in 62 games, but analytically, because Montreal's defense was kind of shit last season, had between like 18 to 25 goals saved above expected, depending on what site you use. Still has 2 years left, still is going to be an above average to good starter, and that's worth $5.5 to $7.5 million, and you have the next 2 years at 3.15. That's backup money at this point. That's average backup money. July 1st of 2024, Juraj Slafkovsky signed an 8-year deal at $7.6 million after a 50-point season, when in that second half of the season, he was awesome. Didn't quite take that step this season, but he was still on his ELC this year. It kicks in this following season. And even if he just becomes like a 60-point guy with the salary cap going up, considering this deal is between his ages like 21 to 29-year-old seasons, even if he's just mid-60s points and a physical demon, which you want come playoff time, this is going to be a very good deal. It can become a great deal if he gets within the mid-60s, which is definitely possible if he develops that high-end skill / IQ. The physical traits are already there. and he's only going to get better from here. We just need more consistency from you, Slavkovsky. You need to play very good in the first half of the season. He always plays good in the back half of the season, consistent in the first half, and this will be a very, very, very good deal. Also, that summer, locked up another youngster in Caden Gooley, 6 years, $5.5 million. This year, he did deal with injuries, but had 18 points in 55 games, and again, it doesn't kick in until this season. He's going to be a rock-solid second pair, more so defensive guy behind Lane Hudson at $5.5 million for his age 23 to 29-year-old seasons. Damn good by Kent Hughes. Fast forward to midway through the season, and Jake Evans signs a 4-year deal at $2.85 million. Reliable fourth-line center that kills penalties very well. He did kind of have an insanity start to the season offensively with 23 points in his first 36 games, which is clearly just like his PDO and shooting percentage was off the charts. He did slow down and had 13 points in his final 42 games. But still, for $2.85 million, some team probably would have given him 4 years or 5 years at 3.5 on the open market. You know what you're getting out of him. Probably 25 to 30 points a year, solid defense. It's an okay to good deal. The last deal for the signings and extensions was Noah Dobson's 8-year deal at $9.5 million. Again, players like him do not grow on trees. 6'4" right-handed defenseman that have scored 70 points in a season. I talked about it in the trade portion. I think this deal is fine. I don't think it's going to be some huge surplus because I do think Hudson is going to be the franchise's #1 defenseman offensively going forward. But as long as he can be like 50-ish points, solid analytics, which his analytics were very good this season. The eye test did not quite line up with that. But as long as he can be a consistent top 20 to 30 defenseman, honestly, considering there's not a ton of age risk on this, considering he's only 25 years old, this deal will be okay. There is some risk to it. But there also could be some solid reward. It's like a B, maybe a B minus, but I'm going to go with a B. I'm going to get called biased if I say a B minus. It's okay. You weren't going to get him on some kind of discount after you gave up that much to get him, and he was a restricted free agent that was only a year away from unrestricted free agency. It's an okay deal. It's fine. Yeah, when it comes to the signings, I'm going to go with an A. The Doc, Newhook, and Allen are like, they're bad deals, but if those are your bad deals, those are probably like C+ deals. Like, you're perfectly fine with them. And if Doc and Newhook can stay healthy, those are probably going to be surplus value. The Slavkovsky deal, very, very good. The Caulfield deal is a true A+++. It is going to be one of the best deals going forward in the NHL. The Gooley deal, I'm very, very high on. Jake Evans, very solid for a good fourth-line center that's still only like 28, 29 years old. It's not like he's 31, 32, and you have to deal with some age on that deal. And the Dobson deal is about an A. Their long-term deals have all been very good. Those 4-year deals of Newhook, Doc, and then the 2-year deal of Allen, I don't exactly love. But yeah, in total, I land with an A. There's no, Kent Hughes, rightfully so, did not go swinging in free agency and acquired 28, 29-year-olds on 5 to 7-year deals that have wrecked this team's cap sheet. They've been smart about it, and they've locked up, which I really like. They've locked up their young guys on long-term deals instead of dumb bridges. And with the Nick Suzuki, this would definitely be an A, maybe even an A+. But yeah, I think an A is fair the Montreal Canadiens signings and extensions. Now, last but not least, we have the results section. How has the team progressed on the ice with their record the last 4 years? And they started off in 2022 being the worst team in the NHL with 55 points. Then 2023, they were expected to stink and honestly probably exceeded expectations with 68 points. They probably wanted to be worse to get Bedard. But in 2024, they were expected to take a little bit of a step. They went up 8 points to 76 points. And this year, they were expected to take a leap, but only like 5 to 10 points probably, and instead they went up 91 points to make the playoffs as the last team in the Eastern Conference. A grade that I'm going to be giving them for this is an A-. It's definitely closer to an A considering they've taken that jump to the playoffs. But granted, the Eastern Conference was a total shit show in terms of that last wildcard spot. And yes, I know that they were actually tied with the New Jersey Devils, who had their host of problems in the final half of the season, the back half of the season. But I'm going to go with an A- because there was still big problems with this team. The defense was still kind of ass. They ranked third in expected goals against per 60. And I don't think I know Dobson. I don't think they should be better next season, but they did have the 5th worst expected goals percentage as well this season. It took a late push, an amazing push to make the playoffs. And again, that Eastern Conference was that weak. You usually don't make it in with 91 points in a season, but still, the results have been very good. A-, you could argue an A, but I think an A- is fair given the circumstance. It's not like they cruised into a playoff spot this year with 98 points and had top 10 to 15 analytics across the board. There were some concerns. They are getting Demidov. They are getting Dobson. But even this season, I don't think that they're a lock to make the playoffs despite being a 91 point team, because I do think last year was a little bit fugazi, and I think if you're honest with yourself as a Canadiens fan, you'd agree. So our overall grade now, I landed on an A minus, and I know people are going to scream. You gave the San Jose Sharks an A, and they're still absolutely stink, and that is true. But it's all about the stages. The San Jose Sharks are still at the bottom, and I think by comparison, San Jose was in a better spot than Montreal when they were at the bottom. And also, Montreal, of course, had Nick Suzuki and Caulfield from the prior regime. San Jose had absolutely nothing in terms of young guys. Caulfield was like 21 years old. Suzuki was like 22. But yeah, I still think that this is a very good rebuild. And I think that they're definitely ahead of the Utah Mammoth, who I also had an A minus. If I were to rank it right now, it'd be San Jose, Montreal, Utah, then Ottawa, Detroit, and then all the way down the Buffalo Sabres. But it's a very good rebuild. They've drafted and developed very good. The trades are a little bit of a mixed bag, but definitely more good than bad. The signings extension, if they get a Lane Hudson signing done relatively soon, that's under $9.5 million, this becomes an A minus. And the results are very, very good as well. Going forward, their salary cap sheet is rather wide open. Besides their very good deals, they only have surplus value deals past like the 3-year mark. They do have Gallagher. They do have Anderson still on contract, but that's only 2 years. They're in a very good spot. They do have some holes still, second line center, but they do have the assets to potentially fill those holes down the line, whether it's Michael Hage or trading some of their prospects. They still have like a top 5 prospect pool in the NHL. It's really going to come down to, in terms of them being a consistent contender, Demidov, does he become a legit top 30 player in the NHL? Because similarly to Clayton Keller, I love Nick Suzuki. Can he be the straight up best player on a Stanley Cup winning team? TBD. I think he has a better shot than, say, Clayton Keller to be that top 20 overall player in the NHL. But Demidov needs to become a superstar. Slavkovsky needs to be more consistent. Hudson needs to work on his defensive game, although I don't think that he's some kind of defensive black hole. They're in a fantastic spot. And Fowler hopefully becomes a starter because Montembeau is like 28, 29 years old already. But they're in a very good spot. They get an A minus. They should be a damn good team through a true contender from 2028 to 2035. I like the way that they have built for the most part. There has been some mishaps versus like San Jose. I think that have done it really the right way. I keep on comparing them to San Jose, but they have swung a couple times. It hasn't worked out, but overall, Kent Hughes has done an amazing job, especially following up Mark Bergevin that did do some bad things. At the end, it has been an awesome rebuild. And as a result, they're safely the second best rebuild that I've reviewed thus far, even though I view Utah Mammoth also at an A minus. They have done awesome. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about the Montreal Canadiens rebuild? Again, I almost gave it an A. I really considered giving it an A, but let me know in the comments, what do you think? What would you give the Montreal Canadiens? I'll be seeing you in the next one. Let me know who you want to see next week. Peace.